10-Minute Jazz Lesson Podcast, episode 226. Hey everybody, welcome back into another episode of the 10-Minute Jazz Lesson Podcast. This is episode 226. If you're brand new to the show, my name is Nick Manella. I'm the creator and host of this program. And if you are one of our longtime listeners, welcome back. Starting a brand new series with the new month. And I'm really excited about this series. What we're going to be doing is talking about how to play bluesy phrases in places where you wouldn't expect them. And this is going to be a really effective tool in your toolbox. So before we jump into the show, just a reminder that you can get the PDF to this episode and every other episode that we've ever done at our Patreon site. The way you find that is by going to our website, 10minutejazzlesson.com, clicking on one of the Patreon banners. And the way that it works is you dedicate $3 of your hard-earned money to us every month. And for that, in return, you get a copy of every single lesson that we've ever done. And that's going to be a huge addition to your jazz education library. At this point, we have over 225 PDFs over there. Now, remember, we've also started the $5 tier where you are going to get an excerpt of the audio examples from the PDF. So the 3 examples that I'll show you this week, those will be sort of chopped up and left separate from the rest of the episode. So if you want to play along with those, you don't have to skip around and find them in the episode. So again, if you want to sign up, you can join over 300 members over there, 10minutejazzlesson.com, click on one of the Patreon banners and get yourself signed up today for instant access. All right, let's jump into the episode. So we talked a little bit about it. We're going to be using blues phrases in places that normally you'd be screaming for some bebop phrases. And I think that this is really effective. It's just one more thing that we can do to keep our listeners listening to us. You know, in a place where they're going to expect you to play a super complicated phrase, but instead you just kind of lay this really soulful and simple blues phrase on them. That's going to be something that is really going to keep people coming back for more because they're always going to be wondering where you're going to go with your solo. Very, very compelling. So to jump off, let's talk about the fact that I'm not going to be using the blues scale in this at all. In fact, if you go to episode 134 of the podcast, I really explain why I don't really like the blues scale, and I give what I think is a really good alternative to it that involves a major pentatonic and some different things that we're doing to it. And in these episodes, I am going to use that major, minor, pentatonic instead of the blues scale. So if you're not sure what that is, go back, listen to episode 134, and I give my reasons and I give a complete rundown on why I'm using that scale instead of the traditional blues scale. So I just wanted to let you guys know that that's the device that we're going to use over this. Okay, so in this episode, we're going to talk about using blues phrases over a 2-5-1. So the place where we normally try to venture into bebop land and these really specific devices and chord substitutions and all that kind of stuff that we talk about on the podcast, which is really useful, really fun to be able to do, we're going to get rid of all that and we're going to really simplify. So let's first talk about kind of why we can use this really simple scale instead of following the chord changes perfectly. So let's think first about what a 2-5-1 is. So what it really is it's a cadence, right? It's kind of a perfect cadence. We get the 2, and then we get the 5 dominant 7, and that's leading us to 1. So a 2-5-1 really pulls us toward that 1 chord. The reason for the presence of the other chords is to ultimately pull us toward that 1 chord and the tonality of that 1. Right? It's giving that 1 the gravity that it deserves. So it makes sense that we can actually play in the key of the 1, in this case, a bluesified 1, over the entire 2-5-1. As long as we're pulling to that one chord really strong, your ears aren't going to really notice that, hey, this person is not weaving their way in and out of this 2 chord and this 5 chord perfectly. It really all depends on how we construct a phrase and the fact that we get that strong 1. So here's the thing. Here's sort of the caveat to all 3 of these examples that I'm about to show you, is that when we do land on 1, we're going to land on the root. We're going to hear the root of that 1 chord first before we do anything. Now, normally when we're playing bebop, we really don't like that, but when we're doing these blues phrases, we really want the pull, 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 and then the resolution to 1. And I think you're going to see when we start going through the examples how effective that actually is. Okay, so let's jump into the first example. You'll notice on all 3 of the examples, in concert pitch, I'm doing a 2-5-1 to the key of C. And I've made the 1 chord a dominant 7th chord just to kind of replicate the sound of the blues, because I think the 2-5-1 in measure 9, 10, and 11 over the blues is a perfect place to start to apply some of these lines. So you'll just notice that that 1 chord is a dominant. All right, so let's take a look at the first example, and what you're going to notice right off the bat is that there's a big fat flat 9 over the 2 chord. So right away you're probably thinking to yourself, this is not going to fit. And you'd be right, technically it doesn't fit. But what you're going to notice is that the overall effect of the line, as we just talked about a minute ago, sort of overrides the fact that we really never want to use a flat 9 over a minor 7 chord. So what I want you to do is take in the line as a whole, and then you'll start to realize that, rules are always meant to be broken. Same thing over the 5 chord, over the G7 chord. We are using an E flat over a G7 chord, and we're not using it in the context of like an altered or any kind of substitution. We're just using it in the way that we want to build this phrase off of that major, minor, pentatonic blues sound. So enough of me talking about it. Let's check it out. But do have the PDF in front of you so you could see how some of these notes that would typically be out of bounds kind of work on this. So now if you think back to the way that that flat 9 sounded over the 2 chord, it shouldn't bother you. At least it doesn't bother me at all. And you can hear I also kind of threw in a little bluesy rhythm with that, 16th note before the dotted 8th note in the second measure. And that really helps too, to give it that blues feeling and kind of drive home the point that you're sort of glossing over these chords and that you didn't mean to play them perfectly. It all kind of helps. All right, let's look at example number 2. So same thing, this time we start on that flat 9. And what you'll notice is I carry the same rhythm from measure 1 over to measure 2 of this 2-5-1. And I think that really helps too. Like playing with a motive really helps kind of drive home this bluesy sound. And then on this one, you'll notice again, I'm resolving right to the root of the 1 chord, and I'm actually doing that on all of these. So let's check out the second example. All right, so hopefully, again, that flat 9 is not bothering you, and you can feel the gravity. It's all leading toward that anticipation of the downbeat, and that's where your ears should really be sort of begging for that resolution, and then it happens, and all is right with the world at that point. Okay, let's take a look at our third and final example. This one's a little bit different. So what you'll notice is I'm still staying inside of that major, minor pentatonic for the 2 chord and the 5 chord, but what you're going to notice is that the notes happen to fit both of those chords. Another thing to notice is that I am playing the exact same phrase over the 2 chord as I am over the 5 chord. And then when I resolve to the 1 chord, that's when I bring in that blues sound and I play an extended line over that 1 chord. So you don't necessarily need to go all over that blues scale over the 2/5 if you don't want to. And just because there are some notes in that scale that don't fit over the 2 chord and the 5 chord does not necessarily mean that you have to use them. There are certain notes over the 2 chord and the 5 chord that fit perfectly while still using that blues scale. So let's check out line number 3, and what I want you to listen to is how the 2 chord and the 5 chord are going to be perfectly inside, and then I'm resolving it using that extended blues scale over the 1 chord. All right, so there's our 3 examples. Hopefully you're starting to wrap your ears around this concept. And I think it's really effective if we are just kind of like filling our solos with this really specific kind of bebop stuff. It's kind of like a breath of fresh air if over a certain 2/5/1 or in a certain chorus over the blues, we just kind of gloss over all those chords and we just play something with some soul, something that reminds us that jazz is actually built off of the blues. And we're going to study a few musicians that do this to great effect later on in the month. But start with these 2/5/1s and just using the cool thing about this is it's really simple and it's really easy to do. If you're familiar with that minor, major, pentatonic, you really are going to be able to kind of do whatever you want over this. And it's not like the other concepts that we talk about that take like months and months and months of work. You should be able to start implementing this pretty quickly, and start building your own phrases. You can use some of my phrases as examples, but start to build your own pretty quickly. All right, so just a reminder, if you're in that $5 tier, make sure you go to your section of Patreon and get those 3 examples sort of out there on their own so you can play along with them. And if you can't afford the $5 a month, we still do have the $3 tier. So if you want to check that out, 10minutejazzlesson.com, click on one of the Patreon banners, get yourself signed up today. Thanks for tuning in, everybody. If you have any questions on this, please ask in the 10-Minute Jazz Lesson Community Facebook group. That's the best place to get in touch with me. Hope you all have a great weekend. Again, hopefully you're all staying safe and healthy out there, and we'll see you next week with some brand new episodes. Talk to you soon, everybody. Bye.